Hello and welcome to another episode of the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast. Today, Travis and I are going to be joined by a very special guest where we are going to take a deep dive into Honda and their electric woes and really just sort of everything that Honda is and isn't doing maybe at the moment. But before we get to that, of course, let's roll the intro and then dive into our 5-star reviews.
Alex, we have a couple that came in. Hopefully next time we'll have a few more, but let's start with Matt R. He says, such a great podcast. I've been watching Alex's main YouTube channel for many years, even before it was Auto Buyer's Guide, and I've always found him to provide the best and most technical information out there regarding the automotive industry. This is my go-to listen to in the car, from, to, and with work. Just don't worry, that was me. Thank you both for providing such a great content and navigating all the intricacies of the industry. P.S. I'm not an Apple person either, Travis. Don't worry about not reviewing yourself. We got you covered. Thank you, Matt R., for looking out and giving me the bailout that Alex will not buy, unfortunately.
Because, I mean, Travis has yet to review his own podcast on Apple Podcasts.
I'm so torn up about it. It's not my right.
It's one of those necessary things. We need these reviews. So come on.
And
there's another one too.
That might end up on my personnel review. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how the HR system works.
Roll through the next review because this one called us informative and witty.
And witty. Thank you, Kenneth. The content coverage was great. Both hosts are knowledgeable and funny. Most importantly, the recording audio level is just about right. And that actually is a huge thing. Have you ever had that next podcast come on as it skips around? And that is not the same volume you had the last one at.
Yeah, and sorry for having one podcast a few ago that only had one channel. Oops, my bad. Also, elephant in the room, I'll talk about this little guy here. I managed to literally trip and pour myself into a pile of bricks last week. So,
unfortunately, you know what wasn't recording? The cameras around the house, or you haven't shown that to us yet. And the intro that I got when I first signed on, you'll talk about
was recording. I think that video snippet will be taken to my grave.
That makes sense. But when I logged into this call, a gift that I had sent Alex was part of the wit that you're referring to. I had a light show going on. There was a specific music in the background, and Alex got to debut his all new look.
Yeah, Travis has my sense of humor, so this arrived in the mail, and I will say it covers most everything except for the edge of the brick bruise right down around there somewhere. So with that out of the way, let's introduce our special guest. We have Mack joining us from InsideEVs. And Mack, what is your title there these days?
It is technically interim editor-in-chief. I prefer deputy editor, but either works. I also have some brick-related trauma, if that helps.
I was going to say, we'll go with Big Cheese. Can we call you the Big Cheese there?
I am the Big Cheese. I've been there. I mean, that's been my role at every place I've ever worked, the Big Cheese. But when I was like 10, we were at a family friend's house that had a trampoline with no net. And the way to get onto the trampoline was a pile of bricks they had arranged in the shape of a staircase. Because it makes me sound like I grew up in the 70s. This was the early 2000s.
Hey, now.
Sorry. And then unbelievably, with the net without a trampoline, or the trampoline without a net and 8 people on it, me, the tiniest kid, got launched onto the pile of bricks and landed right here. And the scar went away like 2 years ago. This has been 20 years later. So we have both been brutalized by a pile of bricks before. So They're sneaky.
Hey, at least you got to experience childhood like I did. I mean, trampolines not only didn't have the nets, they didn't have anything to cover the springs. If you jumped on a spring, that was just tough. So, too bad for you.
One time my babysitter caught me. I was fully upside down heading onto the trampoline, and the babysitter caught me by the ankles. And I was like, I think you just saved me from paralyzation. So
I mean, you guys also didn't know the true danger of the lawn dart.
What is a lawn dart?
Exactly as dumb as it sounds. Big missile-shaped things with a pointy dart at the front, and you threw them at the lawn or at each other. Because let's be honest, they really didn't just end up in the lawn. Bad kids would throw them at their brothers, sisters, etc.
It was a recreational javelin.
That makes sense.
Yeah, they weren't great.
We used to be a country.
We used to be. We used to be. More of us ended up dead. Maybe that was, I don't know, whittling the weak out of the flock here. So let's drive through our viewer questions here, because we did have an email in from the Lee family that's right up all of our aisles here, I think. And they're asking, did Toyobaru state, the Toyota Subaru dealie here, what kind of battery is used for the small auxiliary battery in BZ Woodland and Trailstaker? My memory is that it's a regular old flooded lead acid battery. I don't know if either of you know anything different, but he's asking, have they fixed the battery drain problems?
I didn't think to ask about that. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that problem.
I had to look it up because I didn't realize that it was also suffering from the issue, and I can find nothing saying that it has been fixed or that it's truly pervasive either. So like either end of this thing.
I did write this story on like you're worrying about the wrong EV batteries, of how everyone is worried about their giant high voltage battery, which all the data suggests lasts very long, and if it's going to fail, fails early and within the warranty period. But man, these companies cannot figure out their 12-volt batteries. I mean, I didn't know that Toyota was having this problem, and as per usual with reliability data, it's hard to get the signal through the noise of. There's obviously just the situation of there's not the warning that you get with a gas car, right? Where you start getting the slow crank and you can pick up on it. It took me 3 months of not replacing my battery before it inevitably died when I just ignored the slow crank on my old Tahoe. But with EVs, it's a much more binary, like yes, no. And I think that catches people out. But yeah, I wasn't familiar with this.
I have to admit, I'm surprised that manufacturers don't use an even smaller little battery and just depend more on the high voltage battery and some sort of DC-DC converter in there, which they're obviously using anyway to keep the 12-volt battery topped up. It's not like there's an alternator hanging out in there somewhere.
Right, but Rivian did that, and then they were having vampire drain problems.
Yeah.
Right? And so like there's the yin and yang of that, of like you want. And I think a lot of one of the challenges with over-the-air updates for some of these companies is the legacy companies are less willing to. There was all these situations early on with Rivians and Teslas where they would try to do an update and they would run out of 12-volt power, and then that would break the car. And I think that is like, category 5 nightmare scenario for all these legacy companies. And so they want to build in that buffer, and yet still, I mean, we know Hyundai can't figure it out, and we know there's the one warning light I think I've ever had on the Blazer EV was when I got it. It had been sitting on the lot for like 5 months, and I assume, and I think the 12-volt was low, which triggered a warning for the low voltage, but also triggered a warning for the high voltage battery. We brought it in, and there was no problem, but I think there was something going on there, and that was the first drive I ever took of it, and then since then there's been nothing. So.
Have you replaced the battery in your Tesla, Travis?
No, I don't believe I have yet. But it's one of the things that Tesla kind of got to get on early. But it's strange because we're talking about this big battery technology, and it's the old battery technology that seems to be holding it back. It's going to be one of those like the last remaining systems from pick a decade when the car battery became part of the solution, because we're asking it to do things that it hasn't before. We're talking about connectivity features that are going to tap into it, and then a high voltage battery that either has to kick all the way on to recharge it, or it's just slowly going to trickle down. But that's the reason why you don't have smaller batteries, is because there's this need for there to be some power there at some point, or regularly, depending on how often you check, your app, your connectivity. But it is strange because yes, you could get away with nearly nothing. A cell phone battery would do it, but you just have to make sure that it's maintained. And then, like we talked about, with Rivian,
depends on how much power you need, really, because
to maintain it, you have to fire up the whole system.
The theory here is that the 12-volt battery is acting as the ballast for the 12-volt system, and a lot of vehicle systems still depend on 12 volts. The headlights, the windshield wiper motors, the window motors, etc. So there could be a situation where, if you've stalled your window motor and your wipers are on, all the wipers are on, all the headlights are on, etc., the blower fan's high, whatever, that maybe you've reached a point where you're drawing hundreds of watts from the 12-volt side, and that would require a bigger DC-DC converter. So they just jam a smaller one in there and a bigger battery and make that do its thing.
Yeah, but any gas car battery, right, is going to require enough amperage to crank the engine. Like that's why
exactly
when you turn the car on, right, all the radio powers down briefly. And so it's interesting because the use case is just so different, where you have a much longer
Mm-hmm.
load that maybe uses more wattage, but you don't have that crazy spike. But there was an
Mm-hmm.
interesting solution to this. I think the Autopian recently reported on this, and the old Hyundai Ioniq hybrids, where there was a button where if your 12-volt
Mm-hmm.
battery was completely dead, you could press it and it would close. It had enough energy stored, I think, to close the contactors and
Yep.
engage the DC-DC converter and start the vehicle without using a 12-volt battery. And it's the only car I
Yep.
know of that ever did that, which is really interesting.
And I'm sad that they didn't continue that, because the way they did that was it was actually part of the high voltage traction battery. It was like segmented, and it
Mm.
was like, this part's for the 12-volt system.
Mm.
And then we'll let you draw that down and then sort of give it a zap with the other side. It seemed like a really good idea. Maybe it was just too expensive.
Would be great if the
Um,
Ioniq 5 had that.
yeah.
So that ICCU didn't brick you, but yeah.
Hmm. It is
Wow.
interesting. The one benefit I've noticed, though, is that most of the traditional car companies, when they dive into the EV space, they bring with them all their low power draw phone interfaces and the cell modems and everything else, and those systems don't use as much power as the Rivians and the Teslas of the world, where they're trying to do everything with one central computer that uses just a lot more processing power. So the vampire drain in all the long-term EVs that we've had have been best by far in the traditional auto companies EVs versus Rivian or Teslas that we've owned. Those definitely chewed through their battery part real quick.
Well, that was part of how Rivian addressed this with the Gen 2 upgrade, because on the Gen 1s, in order for that, when it detected the battery was getting low, it would automatically connect to the high voltage battery, engage DC to DC, and top it off. But what they ran into is in the Rivian, there was no way to engage that without powering on the whole system, including the
Mm-hmm.
central computer and all of these things. And in the Gen 2, they now have a float system that allows them to trickle feed it without engaging all of the other electronics, which I believe has mostly solved the vampire drain issue. But yeah, I have no vampire drain that I can detect in my Blazer EV. But
Yeah.
the flip side of that is when I, send a remote start command or a remote unlock command, it takes 30 to 45 seconds, or sometimes doesn't happen at all. So
Exactly. There's the pros and cons. This leads me on to our topic of the day, which is Honda. And before we dive into there, I just want to read these two quotes from Mack's piece here that I thought were really interesting, which is why he's on this episode to begin with. The first one is, quote, "I regret buying what company executives were selling back then. This time we're serious," they said. "We're committed. But since then, there has been just retreat after retreat. They dialed back EV investments, killed off the ZDX, all while insisting that the Zero Series would prove the doubters wrong. Today, they proved us right." And the second was, "From decade-long saga of teasing a new NSX to decade-long saga of saying this time we're really serious about EVs, the company has a terrible habit of building hype for non-existent products. 3 years ago, they heavily implied to me that an electric S2000 and an electric NSX are both in the works. Now I can't even get a replacement electric crossover. I'm exhausted and I'm out of hope. I feel lied to." So with that, let's let Mac introduce the origin story of this, because Honda's been on a culling game lately.
yeah, so this was written in response to Honda announcing that they were killing the Zero Series US market models. The Zero Alpha is still going to come to India and Southeast Asia, but the flagship program of their EV efforts, if you could call it that, is the Zero Series, which was supposed to be built in Ohio, encompass the Zero Series Saloon, which is that fastbacky, cool, Reiki looking thing, or cool or weird, depending on how you look at it, the SUV, and then the Acura RSX, which was notably supposed to replace the ZDX before we knew the ZDX was going away, and then they canceled the ZDX, and then also presumably was going to really fill in the role of the RDX, which now their main volume for, high volume product for Acura, besides the MDX, is now going to have take a couple gap years to figure its stuff out. And so we've seen a lot of these retreats, and I think there's so many parts of the Honda story that people don't even remember, like this big partnership they had with GM. As I spoke to the CEO in 2022, it was like, first of all, he was saying, we're two similar size companies, which already was, they
Yeah.
similar size by revenue globally, encountering all business, or encompassing all business units. Yes. But yeah, they were talking about, oh, it's not just going to be a rebadge of the Blazer to become the Pro. Like, we are going, this was before we knew those names and stuff, but this was, we're going to have this long partnership that's going to lead to affordable EVs, and we're going to work together on all this next generation stuff. And that just fell apart very quickly. And then next it was Zero Series, and they came out of the gate saying, oh yeah, we're going to do an SDV, we're going to do a software defined vehicle. It's going to have an AI assistant. All of these areas where I would say Honda has never demonstrated a core competency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say Japan in general hasn't had a huge AI boom that we've seen yet. And so it was a big shot, and we only knew very few details about it, like that the RSX would have double wishbone front suspension, which is extremely Acura coded language to be like, yeah, it'll kind of be a driver's car, but they didn't really say anything specific about it besides, I think, over 300 miles of range. It came out that this was going to be a 400 volt class system. So we've seen some suggestion that this maybe wasn't going to be the most competitive product. But the thrust of the piece is that at some point you got to get in the game, right? Like you can do as much as you can learning from other competitors' mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I think we've learned a lot over the past 10 years is even if you wait for a long time to do something, like Stellantis was late to the EV games, their first major long-range EVs still came out underbaked, right? Toyota was late, and they still struggled with a lot of problems with the BZ4X in terms of not being able to fast charge it twice in a day and things like that. Or even when you look at Toyota's experience being late to the turbocharged truck game, right? And then it comes out and it still doesn't work, right? Because the first time you do anything, anyone who's ever done anything can tell you this. The first time you do something is very difficult. And I think a lot of companies, especially the Japanese companies, are very prone to letting perfect be the enemy of good, where they are waiting for everything to be worked out. And the thrust of the piece is that like these things don't get worked out by themselves. Companies work them out. People work them out. And if you don't have any customer data, you don't have any product in the marketplace, you can learn second order lessons from what publicly shared lessons other automakers learn, but you are always going to be learning behind and learning less deeply than the people actually learning this.
Mm-hmm. And that's the main thing that I get from this as well. The battery issues, for instance, not every EV has a battery issue. Manufacturers have solved this, worked through this. How do we know that something this simple that the industry will say, oh, that was solved a decade ago? How do we know that when Honda doesn't finally pop up with a new EV, that little things like that are still going to be creeping into the product because they didn't do it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you don't know. They said, oh, well, we learned a lot about, obviously they got pretty close to the finish line. These products were supposed to launch this year.
Yeah.
I know Saloon was pushed back.
RSX was supposed to be in production only in a few months. So
Yeah.
that should have been a 100% fully baked prototypes rolling down the road kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think it's quite challenging where you do all that engineering work, which surely they learned some lessons there. But there are some lessons where, as every automaker has learned the hard way, there's a lot of lessons you learn once the customer gets the car, right? GM learned it the hard way with Ultium. Hyundai is learning it with the ICCU situation. Toyota learned it with these lessons are really hard. And I think when you assume that you can just catch up later, it's a very dangerous assumption, especially when, one thing I took the InsideEVs job thinking about was just, if you accept that the transition from gas vehicles to electric vehicles is a more complicated and more expensive and bigger transition from than the difference between film and digital cameras. And if you expect that the investment timeline is longer, you can't pivot as quickly in this industry with a lot of fixed costs, then logic dictates that there is going to be a Kodak moment. Some of these companies are not going to make it, are not going to thread this needle, right? And obviously, Honda's decision is rooted in the fact that for most people, EVs aren't profitable right now. And that's just the truth. That's difficult. And now they're not being pushed towards it. But Honda was a company that I think is very keen on promoting itself as being focused on fuel efficiency and practicality. And, the buyers seem interested. Prologue sells relatively well, although with heavy incentive spend. And it's just like you need to eventually learn these hard lessons, and they're not going to get cheaper over time, I don't think. And I don't think customer patience is going to in 2021, you can make some pretty serious mistakes with customers understanding that this is a novel market. But if someone's owned 2 GM EVs, and finished their 2-3 year leases in a row, and then in 2028 goes to the Honda dealership and is having the same problems that their 2024 GM EV had, that's going to be a real reputational risk to this company.
Or my wonder here, to be perfectly blunt and honest, is what if it's the opposite problem? What if it's a Prologue owner or a ZDX owner that that loves their Prologue or ZDX.
Yeah.
And now they've leased this thing. They go back and they were a diehard Honda fan. Maybe they didn't know, or they'd only heard in passing that it was related to a GM product, but now they
Right.
really know. Now they're like, oh, wow, this is like not Honda at all. Like everything, including the Honda logo, is made in a General Motors factory, and I love it. So now you buy a GM Pro car? Like, how
Right.
many? I could see people making that transition, honestly, especially ZDX. We actually received an email in about that because they wanted a ZDX because they loved Acuras and they wanted Super Cruise. So it was like this interesting convergence. Like they've
Yeah.
always had Acuras. There's this ZDX thing. They're worried about the GM connection. Like, will it be supported for long term, et cetera? But they're like, but I really like the look and I like the Super Cruise. And they didn't like the Cadillac look.
Yeah.
So I'm like, where's
Yeah.
that customer going to go?
And that customer who got the 2-year or 3-year lease, right? They're going to come back, and not only is there no at the Acura dealership, not only is there no electric alternative, there's no gas alternative. There's no RDX. There won't
Mhm.
be when they come back. And I think that is a real risk in that for all part of why Toyota stepped up their EV investments is they're recognizing that like for all the challenges of selling the EV, once you sell it, the customers are very happy and they want to
Mhm.
come back and they
Yep.
like this experience because all of the reasons I think all three of us are interested in EVs, right? They're quieter, they're smoother, cheaper running costs. You don't have
Yep.
to worry about maintenance. And all of that just so fits with the Honda brand of like,
Mhm.
I was speaking to someone at Honda about this, where I was hearing some of the justifications of it, and I said, all these justifications of how Tesla was doing. Tesla was a once in a lifetime thing. You couldn't replicate that, or Chinese EVs or X. It sounds a lot like what a GM PR person would have told me in the 1970s when Honda showed up and proved that you could do this all without catalytic
Mhm.
converters. Like, that's why I'm a Honda fan. That's where this sort of anger
Yeah.
or disappointment comes from. I've been a Honda fan my whole life. I've owned S2000s and the Acura CL Type S and a couple Hondas here and there and recommend them to my family because I believe in reliability. I believe in practicality. I believe in efficiency. And yeah, it's just disappointing where like this is a moment where that
Mhm.
sensibility is, I mean, a Civic EV is like something that I would just love to see in the marketplace right now.
And this
And
this brings me on to my next question, if I can.
yeah.
We'll start with Travis. Travis, when you think of Honda, what does Honda mean to you? Like what is the attribute that is Honda?
So honest and like Mac, I'm generally a fan of Honda. I've owned a few in my day, and it's because they've had some uniqueness within their product lineup, right? It'll fall in a category, but there's something that makes it a little bit different. So I'm left to thinking if someone comes back, not ZDX to something like an RSX, but maybe the Prologue owner comes back and goes, "Oh, here's an RSX." I would expect that RSX to have been
Mhm.
different, but I'll never know what that different looked like. That's a small thing for me. But it's just been a way to find their way within a niche. The problem has been that niche does not carry on
Mhm.
mainstream in mass in ways that support some of that decision making.
So like
Element,
pick three
CRZ,
pick 3 or
S2000.
4 adjectives. What 3 or 4 adjectives come to your mind when someone says Honda?
So I would say it's reliable. I would also say affordable. People look to them as not going to bust the wallet, and I would say creative. Somewhere within there, there's a creative element to it. Um, oh goodness, I'll stick with three.
Okay. I would my natural instinct is somewhere along those lines. The Hondas from my childhood were where I'm thinking here. The 90s, 80s and 90s where it was like they were the more fun alternative to the Toyota. Like you want the Toyota if you want actual reliability and you buy the Honda because it's almost as reliable but it's a bit more fun kind of a thing. What about you, Mac? What are your adjective thoughts here?
Yeah, I would say reliable and like practical slash affordable, efficient and fun in that order, like the descending order. I think of Honda in like the 2000s too, of
Mhm.
like the world of the Ridgeline and the Odyssey and having all of these cubbies and the fit and
Mhm.
things like making something super practical that's also fun
Mhm.
and fun to drive and reliable. And yeah, I agree with Travis as well. I mean, this is one of my core ones, but I do think they're they've always been willing to go a little outside the grain. Ridgeline's an example of that, but so is S2000. Um, yeah, and I thought there was. I think I really agree with Travis's point of I was looking forward to seeing what their form of different looks like, because in a
Yeah.
lot of ways these look like replacement level vehicles that are similar, but things like the way that they were talking about the body twisting as part of, as someone who loves a car that rolls and talks to you that way, like loves the way Miata does that. I thought that was going to be really interesting. But yeah, I think that's one of the core disappointments here of like, you know, win or lose, if Honda built the EV, then it's a Honda EV. But right now they don't have a Honda EV. They have a GM EV that feels. I mean, I'm a fan of the Prologue and that I lease a Blazer EV. I like that car. But yeah, that I was really looking forward to feeling like what does it actually look like when the company tries here.
And this is, I think, going back to maybe my larger point here, which is let's reassess some of these thoughts, because I think that Honda, as it is in the harsh light of day right now, and the Honda of my memory and my natural thoughts of the brand, et cetera, and their product line, they're not exactly in agreement. Because I think if we go down this list, reliability has been, oddly enough, something that Honda has had some issues with. They've had definite 5-speed and 6-speed automatic transmission issues in a few years ago. They've had some 10-speed automatic issues relatively recently. That 1.5 liter turbo has had some, teething troubles at the beginning. There are these questions around CVT reliability and the push towards CVTs, et cetera. So the reliability, it's like, yes, I think statistically Honda does very well in all the metrics that we can see, but they aren't where they used to be. And often we now see Hyundai or Kia above Honda, or Buick now and then being inserted above Honda, Mazda, for instance, above Honda very regularly on some of these data sets. And then the affordable question is also something that I don't necessarily see there anymore. When we get customers or viewers in asking questions, and they're talking about what's the most affordable this, what's the most affordable that, it's never a Honda, because the Hondas are actually quite expensive for their segment. When you look at really how the pricing builds, base prices, comparable equipped prices, average transaction price, etc., they're in an odd window because they're not the most affordable option, even though they may transact less than some of the competition, which is also kind of an interesting twist. When I looked at average transaction prices for Pilot, for instance, versus Palisade transacts higher. And the average transaction price of the Hyundai portfolio is pretty healthy compared to Honda because they have more expensive models. So I'm just wondering, like, do they fit this mold anymore? Do they fit what our adjectives say they should be?
I feel like Honda's missing a little bit of creative right now, right? That was one of the things, is you mentioned Fit and Ridgeline and Odyssey, all these cubbies, all these ways to make things interesting. But one of the things that customers are looking for right now, one of the most important things, is dynamic powertrains. And you look at Odyssey, Ridgeline, Pilot, Passport, they're all missing a hybrid. They're all missing a turbo. They're all missing something that has put these other manufacturers ahead of Honda, either in a power, performance, efficiency way. And there is no answer on the horizon. So we're looking at some key markets where, yes, we like the Civic hybrid, and effectively the same powertrain you find in the Accord and the CRV and the Prelude. But is it more efficient than something like the Toyota offering? No, it's not. So is that enough for the consumer right now? Maybe the market just isn't looking for what Honda has been bringing forward, and Honda needs to be able to adapt to that. That might be where it's fallen behind. We would go, hey, this is interesting, but no one's looked at the Prelude and said, oh my God, what an incredible value for such a unique product in a world that everyone's asking for this. And I'm someone who likes the Prelude.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that was a big part of my piece too, regarding, when you look at Toyota's slowness on EVs, right? Their thing was, we're going to focus on hybrids. And Honda kind of said the same thing, except Toyota kind of meant it, and Honda doesn't seem to have meant it in terms of, Honda has that one hybrid powertrain, which I think is great in the Civic, pretty good in the Accord, and not very good in the CRV. And I remember driving to my driving roads up here. It requires like a 70 mile per hour highway that you gain a lot of elevation, and that engine is just screaming the whole time in the CRV. I really liked the new CRV until I got to that point where I'm like, oh my God, if there's a long highway grid, you really feel that this is not a lot of power for this application. And yeah, on the higher end, that was something I pointed out of like, yeah, they say they're so committed to hybrids, but they say I think sometime in 2027 they're expecting to have some large hybrid system introduced. And it's bizarre to me because they had a hybrid system in the MDX 10 years ago and then it never went anywhere, right? Like that was the performance upgrade of the MDX in the Acura products. But yeah, I think always I have struggled with, I mean, as far back as when I was working at a Honda dealership in 2015, I was like, it never felt like the Pilot or the Passport, which came later, but the Pilot or even the Odyssey was losing a little bit of that like special feeling that made it feel like a Honda. Because yeah, it was that engine is pretty nice. That V6 is nice in terms of how it revs out. It's nice that it's still naturally aspirated for some buyers. But the SUVs have never, a Mazda CX-9 for all of its faults, or CX-90 now, still felt like a Mazda through and through. And I never really felt the same way in like a Pilot, right? It felt like a Highlander. And, there was no, and I think your point about average transaction prices, I would not be surprised in so many of these segments to see that, Hyundai enters at a lower point and also reaches to a higher point because a loaded up Palisade is a truly aspirational product in a way. Like Telluride, I get people who have no interest in cars being like, oh, what is that? And I've never had that what is that moment with a Pilot. I think Passport is getting there, especially with the focus on trail sport. But yeah, I have felt like I don't think that they have lost anything. And I think Civic and Accord, I think the current Accord is an excellent car. But as the market has so heavily shifted towards SUVs, that has just never been where I think Honda's done an amazing job. And to your point, Travis, about uniqueness, like the first and second gen CRV were really unique looking, cool lifestyle products. The comfortable runabout vehicle, as it is called, as it stands for. And then I think that switch from the second to third generation CRV is truly one of the worst redesigns in history in terms of just going from something that had so much charm to something that was such a blob. And I think we've been a little bit on that blob trajectory ever since.
And this makes me ask the next question. Then we'll start with you, Mac. If you think of the Honda product line, which Honda product do you think is the undeniable best in its category and that you would pick over the competition?
I don't think you're going to agree with me here because I know you have different thoughts of the
that's the point,
two-motor hybrid, but I think the Civic Hybrid is still just for like 27 grand. Like that's an excellent car.
So Civic Hybrid, anything else?
Sorry. I thought I was only picking one. Anything else that's best in class?
Because I would agree with you on Civic Hybrid. I really like the Civic Hybrid. And I think that the performance is the answer because for it, yes, the Prius is more efficient. Yes, the Corolla is more efficient. Yes, every other hybrid in that segment is more efficient, but none of them are fun and efficient and more efficient than average. So I think that combo is, I think, a good idea. And I actually would even be fine if they slapped an SI badge on one and gave it better brakes and some cool tires, etc.
Yeah, I have to recuse myself from the other segments in that, like, the last time I drove an Accord hybrid, 3 years ago when I worked at Road and Track, I thought it was my favorite in the class. But I haven't driven the new generation of Camry. I haven't driven the new generation of Sonata. I haven't driven a lot. Now that I'm focused mostly on EVs, most of those segments I haven't. I would not be surprised if Passport was my favorite in the class, but I haven't driven it, so I don't know.
That's the question, I guess. Favorite for personal thoughts, separate from, I would say, statistically, mathematically, objectively better than X. Because I do like the Passport. I think the Passport is a good formula for Honda. If they could shrink that to a CRV and the CRV could look like that, then I'd love one.
Yeah.
But I just don't see a reason to buy a CRV over a lot of the other options. I don't see a reason to buy most of their products over the competition in that way that there used to be, I would say.
Yeah, and I will say
one thing about the CRV, and that's that it's the best in its class of plug-in hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, hands down.
True. Yes, that is so true.
True.
I'm just glad that they're responding to customer choice and consumer preference by abandoning that useless tiny EV segment and focusing on what really matters, hydrogen.
Yes.
But
hey, I had a hydrogen car once, so I'm your hydrogen boy.
Once, and
Travis, so what are your thoughts? What Honda product would you say is objectively best in class?
So I would go Civic Hybrid, but I think what we're running into, the problem is that Honda doesn't win on the objective front, because even us saying Civic Hybrid is subjective. So I
Mhm.
like the Passport. I also like the Ridgeline. I think it's the best riding truck you can find, especially in its class. Everything else is going to be not nearly as comfortable or as creative, but on paper, what
You
does the
wouldn't get a
Ridgeline do
Maverick
better?
hybrid instead?
It's
So
not
that's
really
what
the
I'm
same
saying.
cost.
On paper, what does the Ridgeline do better than anybody else? Not
Mhm.
enough for people to look at the paper, the first thing they see, or
Yeah.
in this day and age, what does Chat GPT say? I'm looking for the highest fuel economy blank. It's not going to be a
Yeah.
Honda. I'm
Yeah.
looking for the highest horsepower blank. Doesn't end up being a Honda. And so it comes down to the subjective.
Mhm.
Can we even get to the point where we're having the subjective conversation, or does the objectivity take everything completely out, even when it comes down to a couple miles per gallon, a couple
Mhm.
horsepower? I
Mhm.
want turbocharge. There go all those V6 Hondas, you know?
Yeah.
I
It's a
just to jump in on the Ridgeline real quick, because this is one area where I do have some experience with the other. That was always something that frustrated me, especially when you look at online car discussions, comment sections about like, oh, I like that Honda made the truck that like truck buyers actually need, and it's like it's
Mhm.
so much more objectively better. And it's like, no, it's not. You look at any like it's not actually more efficient than like the real trucks in the segment. So the only way it's better is, Travis, you're correct. It rides better than the rest of the
Yeah.
competition. But when you look at what you trade off in terms of, towing capability or just people like that truck like feel. People like being able to go off road. People like a low range transfer case, which is really important when you are, first gen Ridgelines had a big problem with overheating their transmissions. I
Mhm.
think has been addressed in the trail sport now. But, there is that thing of they were doing it the Honda way, but really not doing a
Mhm.
ton of work to convince us why the Honda way was better, besides the fact that it rode and handled better than a
Yeah.
Colorado or a Ranger. But in that segment, that's not what people are buying
And,
on.
and you've got to drive it to get to
Right.
Yeah.
that point. And and
Yeah.
and to that, you got to go to the dealer and see the dual action tailgate and the in-bed storage, and you go, oh my gosh, this is so great for a consumer. But did the consumer even go to the dealership to give it a chance to test drive?
Yeah.
I think some products, I think, like Ridgeline, my argument for Ridgeline would be it prevents the customer from leaving. Sort of like the reason they need an EV, to
Yeah.
keep the customer from leaving.
You know, the
Right?
only Honda EV you can have in your driveway right now is a Clarity, an old Clarity EV,
There's one in
because
my neighborhood.
the Fit EV was a lease only, right? Even
Mhm.
the fuel
Yeah.
cell hydrogen, that's a fuel cell only. We have never had a mainstream competitive Honda EV. The closest you can get is a Clarity. If you look at, was
Yeah.
it 2014, 2015, those ran to something like that, and you look at every other
2018.
EV that was right around that category, I mean, it had twice the range of a Volt,
Yeah. And they had
which
Yeah.
hits and
had a
misses.
gas
The,
engine.
And
the
notably,
Clarity plug-in hybrid was fantastic.
right.
Absolutely, it was.
And notably, the Clarity plug-in hybrid, I had that as a press card. There's 100 reviews about it. Find me one professional review of a Clarity electric. You can't. They don't exist. I don't think there was ever a press. You did it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
then you need to work on your
Because
SEO game.
they had them in the fleet here. We had all three Clarities. We had the hydrogen
Oh.
Clarity, we had the plug-in hybrid Clarity, we had the electric Clarity.
Yeah.
The
And
electric
like I
Clarity
said,
was
the plug-in was
the least exciting.
phenomenal as
Oh
far
yeah.
as
Great
far
car.
as the EV range, and then the performance
Mhm.
when you switch over to hybrid
And the
mode.
efficiency, it was so much better than the Volt. I mean, it was
Yeah.
bigger, it was more comfortable. I thought it looked better than the Volt. It was more fun than the Volt. Everything was better about the Clarity plug-in, and then they
And
stuck a fork in it.
remind me which plug-in hybrid they followed that up with. I can't put my finger
What
on
did
it.
GM do?
Yeah.
The 2 liters in that class just, yeah.
I mean,
think
there was an Accord plug-in hybrid once upon a time.
yeah, very briefly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's talking about the Clarity hydrogen, talking about what is it, the CRV-E:/FCEV or something. That was another point I made in the story of like, you can see what it looks like when this company actually cares about a technology, right? Like they are like, damn the haters, we're going to keep doing this because we see the long-term potential and we don't care. And it's like, you can't even build a lease-only California special
Yeah.
EV just to learn something. You can't import a couple Honda E's and I mean, that's the other component of this that I didn't get all the way into, which is just that, like, yeah, I mean, even when they brought the Honda E to Europe, they got creamed immediately.
Yeah.
And so when they have tried, they've failed, and then often they have canceled it before they have gone, even gotten there.
And let me preface this by talking about the realities with Honda and the way they do business. If we're talking about motorcycles, they're a big motorcycle company. They made 21 million motorcycles in 2025. But that's a different side of Honda than it has anything to do with the cars. And Honda will like to tell everybody, oh, we're an engine company. Yeah, but those engines and these engines, not the same engines. And I don't know if I need my car to be related to a lawnmower anyway. So there's that problem. But on the car side of things, Honda's actually a really small company that I think a lot of people don't realize. They have a very small presence outside of North America. If we look at their global volume is 3.4 million or so in 2025, almost half of the volume that Honda produced was built in North America for North America, because China is operated as a 49-51% joint venture. So, and none of those things are related to any other Honda anywhere. So like, they're working with their Chinese partner to create things for China in the Chinese market that never go anywhere else. And there's no institutional learning being pulled out of this joint venture. They're just Honda branded things in China that are related to other Chinese cars out there. So to be honest, I would really throw all the Chinese numbers out, but being generous, we'll give them half the sales volume in China. It really shows that when you look at Honda and the way that they're structured, they're a North American car company that happens to have a parent company in Japan that does other things. And I wonder, is that maybe the problem, is that there's simply just not enough global volume to help them through some of this R&D expense? Because CRV hybrid is such a lazy hybrid to me, because the hybrid drivetrain seems fine, except that higher speed fuel efficiency is a problem. They tweaked it a bit for better performance and towing in the CRV with the now 2-speed lockup setup. But the battery placement is just idiotic. You've got the magic second row seat, which is lovely. Like, the seat bottom cushion lowers down and then raises up to give you a higher seating position when you're in it, and a flatter floor when you're not in it. But guys, that's where the battery should have gone. Instead, they not only block off the spare tire well with the battery, but they don't actually even put the battery in the spare tire well, because they wanted to share so many components with other batteries in the lineup and other vehicles in the lineup that they didn't restructure it to fit better in the storage area. So what they did was they put the battery on top of where the spare tire would go, leaving the entire spare tire well empty. So you can't put a spare in it, and you can't use the space either.
That's not very hot. I mean, that's the whole thing we were talking about, the practicality of, and it is so, their pride, I want to use the word pride because it's a nicer word than hubris, but the worst thing that can ever happen to a company is success. And there's this thing of like, okay, we can't sacrifice magic folding seats because that's so important to us, that you make this much bigger compromise, right? It's like, that's like Chrysler being like, well, the Pacifica hybrid must have stow and go, and therefore we're going to block off the trunk. It's just,
right
there, you need to know when to let things go. And I do think there is so much pride in themselves as an engine company that does all, and I do think there is some shared knowledge between these different components. But yeah, they are also really hurt by the weird role, this sort of vortex of Toyota in Japan, where Toyota is now almost like, I mean, Mazda is like a client state of Toyota.
They're an octopus. They're just slowly
right, and it's like they're not
everything everywhere all at once.
The government of Japan, from what I understand, does not want that much further consolidation, in terms of they don't want Toyota to just eat the whole country. But that's created this weird imbalance of like, okay, so Toyota works with Subaru on EVs and then with Mazda on hybrids, and then the only company that is considered a big enough real challenge to them is Honda, which means it's the only company they don't help. But then Honda's only opportunity is to go work with Nissan, which just, they keep trying to find a way to make it happen.
But would Honda even ask or want Toyota's help, even if Toyota was willing?
I don't know. That's where the pride comes in. But I mean, clearly they were willing to make a deal with GM, which I think I would bet they have less institutional respect for.
I was surprised by that. And I actually wanted to give them credit in the sense that, okay, I mean, Mac, I'm with your original quote, is like, I bought in. I heard Honda say, listen, we're going to be working on this, but we don't want to slapdash whatever we can find
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
put it out to market and it not be a fully baked product with that we want to put our name on. And I said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so good for you for being willing to partner on the ZDX and the Prologue, which are not distinctly Honda products in any way, shape, or form. But I think they did enough to massage at least
Mm-hmm.
the visuals to say, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting Honda slash Acura. Oh, so we're ready for the next line. And it was the Zeros, it was the RDX. And now I'm wondering, is the only baked Honda product in the EV segment going to be a Fila? And is that ever actually going to hit the road? But that in and of itself is also another partnership, which again, I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, Honda says, we don't have this all ready to go in-house. We're going to partner. Good for
And that's the
you. And they're
partnership
partnering
that
with
made
people
no
that they
sense
don't.
to me.
Well, but they didn't have to partner with those manufacturers. Mazda and Toyota and Subaru and Toyota, those partnerships are baked in essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Honda said, we're going to get creative. We're doing something different. I just wish they had taken any of those learnings and applied it to themselves, because they get to dip their toes in the water, get some of this EV data. What are consumers liking, not liking? How can we mix and match that within our own product lineup, because they're now our customers, but not distinctly in our product. And we're not even able to capitalize on that.
And the part of what I find a little disappointing in this is that and the reason I mentioned Honda's volume is I think it's really important for Americans especially to think of it this way. This is a car company that is significantly smaller than Hyundai, and significantly in the things that they build themselves in-house. Again, because China's a wackadoodle little world. And then they're very small sales volume in Europe, and the vehicles they make for Japan are intrinsically quite different from a lot of the products that they make for the United States. Like there's not a lot of shared stuff going on.
Not at all.
Whereas when you look at Hyundai's product portfolio, they sell the same vehicles that are sold in the US in a much larger global network, for instance.
Yeah.
You see Acura versus Volvo, and Volvo sells a significantly higher volume of XC90, for instance, versus MDX globally because of the number of markets it sold in. It's simply sold more places around the world. But that allows them to spend more R&D money on the thing to make it, have more variations, have more options, have more whatever customers are interested in. And so that's why part of me is sad that they didn't go deeper in with GM and really go like, here's the deal. We'll sign on to Ultium. Maybe we relabel a Prologue Blazer thing at the moment, and then this transitions into a system where we buy batteries and we cooperate on control systems and chargers and DC-DC inverters, but we make our own motors or something like that. And then we design our own car to fit this thing. To be perfectly honest, one of the failures, I think, with the Series Zero is that it wasn't a collaboration. They could have styled the outside. They could have taken over the UI. They could have taken over all of that, made it in a Honda factory, built with Honda reliability, etc. But sweet baby Jesus, why are you trying to make your own battery?
Yeah, but it was a collaboration with Sony Honda, which also now the lawsuits about the dealer network are going to be more complicated. That you don't have your own EV to sell them,
right?
It's easier.
Which seems to be like that's why they're going to stick a fork in it. Like, why bother with all the lawsuits?
But they're supposed to be here like this year. That's another, a car product that's supposed to be here this year. That in January they were just talking about it.
Yeah.
I said, oh yeah, it's on its way. It's going to start in California.
But
when?
This is a huge challenge for the Japanese automakers that aren't Toyota, because I think one thing that I've talked about a lot too is it's tough for European companies now, because Europe, let's assume you have a home court advantage, right? Which I think is pretty demonstrably true of how Volkswagen sells EVs in Europe and GM sells so many here, and nobody really sells much the other direction. There is a real challenge for European automakers, which number one, their market is not very profitable as it is and is shrinking. And then also they don't have as many tech companies and companies that have experience with integrating AI and all of these things that they are telling us are going to be important for the future. But if you look at Japan, they have a much bigger issue of, and when we talk about the world sort of going to its different corners, right? Like Japan has no meaningful EV market whatsoever. And their car market is large, but so distinct from the rest of the world to the degree that like you go to South Korea and like the cars look like the Hyundais and Kias you buy here. And because they're driving on mostly roads that were built in a sort of American model. And it's just a much more similar driving situation too, and very highway focused, all these things that really help make cars that are also good in America. And Japan doesn't have that. And Toyota has the scale and the footholds in all the developing markets where they've had to be good all over the world. And they're so flexible and they're not using one platform for everything like everyone else is. They have all kinds of products all over the world and very good at tailoring to local solutions and the scale to be competitive in all of these places. Honda doesn't really have that. I think a lot of their interest in developing market goes to the power sports and the motorcycle market where they are huge, but then they don't have a huge presence in, Latin America or Middle East or anything like that. So they don't get scale there. In general, even Toyota struggles in Europe. It's just Europe really prefers European vehicles. And again, no one's making that much money. And so, it collapses down to America as the center of gravity for everything. And so they, more than even sometimes American companies, are really at the whims of these regulations. But that's what's so challenging is they are, when I was in Japan at this time where I talked to the CEO, we're making biofuels on the roof of our factory, which has solar panels, and we're going to make carbon neutral fuels for our planes and all these things. Like, we really care about this. We're driving towards carbon neutrality. And then the regulations change and they're out. And the way that the only EVs they have ever made have been California ZEV mandate EVs and leased things like the Fit EV. And there is this thing of they want to be idealistic. They want to be a cutting edge player across the world, but they don't really have the scale to do that. And they don't really have the core competency to do that. And so much of the failure is they only have one brand really. And Acura, global Honda does not like when Acura, that's why the Integra Type S is not any quicker than the Civic Type R, because it can't be, because Civic Type R is a global product that has to be the halo, and then Acura has to be the specific thing for America. But if you don't let the luxury brand ever beat the main brand, what is the aspirational quality to it?
And just one quick correction here. In the European Union, Toyota is the #2 passenger car brand. They sold 1.3 million last year. So
I guess I was thinking of Lexus never being able to.
Lexus is a pretty small one, but I think it's understandable why. And this, I think, goes back to the original premise here. 77% of Toyota's sales in Europe were hybrid. There's some diesels in there, but it's basically a hybrid brand. And that's, I think, why they've done well there. Honda's sales volume was 5% of that in Europe. They sold 70,000 things.
Yeah.
Total in Europe,
yes.
Yeah.
And Europe plus the UK. It's
and we talked
very
about the
small
US.
player.
Mack's not the only one who in 2015 was working at a Honda dealer, but I worked at a joint Honda and Toyota dealer.
Same,
and
actually.
So we shared walls, and it was almost double the sales staff, and it was nearly double the sales in general. And we're talking about, it's Honda and Toyota. And so many Americans would say, Honda and Toyota are the same. Right? We're talking about, the same thing, just different sides of the coin. No, very different, because no one came into Honda to buy a truck. Everyone went to Toyota to buy a truck. And no one came into Honda to buy a hybrid. They went to Toyota to buy the hybrid.
Yeah.
And that was even when, if you look at just how many
car. Or
right?
anything niche.
You had a GR Corolla, you had a Supra, you had the 86 or the FRS, whatever it was at the time, and you had more affordable Scions who had either existed or just got rolled into the Toyota portfolio. I mean, it was a crazy world where you go, Toyota has 2 or 3 answers to one category where Honda says we might be in that category. And I'm wondering if the biggest issue is that what we like about Hondas are the small ones. And America is done with small cars. They're done with cars in general. It's all about crossovers. So what's that transition? How do you capture the fun of a Civic in a Pilot? Because is that what Honda's trying to do or needs to do? Because that's a big ask.
Yeah, and I think your point, to broaden the point, which I think is true, by the way, also what we love about Honda is niche products. And this is not a market that supports niche products anymore. You need scale. And perfect example of that is I pointed out in the story, I know the development costs weren't very high, but prioritizing putting out a Prelude over an EV, that is not in the best case scenario, that is not a product that is going to exist on the balance sheet in Japan, right? It's just that segment is too small. But Travis, you like it, right? Because you're an enthusiast. You like it. I haven't driven it. I'm a $45,000 coupe that I'm 5'6" and I can't fit in the back of is
I found
it's such a play to Honda purists, but I
Yeah.
think that's a problem where Honda is trying to maintain and it is not Honda's fault. It's like
Yeah.
we want to do all of the things Toyota does and we don't have the scale. We want to do
Mhm.
niche things, but niche things are really hard to do. And our core competency is small and light and simple, which is exactly what Americans are rejecting. And it's also why, Toyota with Lexus was able to say, okay, Lexus is going to, even though it's a luxury brand, or even though we want to focus on our reliability, it's a luxury brand. So we're going to introduce new tech and push the limits there. Honda has always applied the same formula to Acura that applies to itself, where it's focused on practicality and simplicity and all these things where, okay, you want a cutting edge driver assistance system. Great. You can get it into the ZDX. Like that's the one that we make that has that. And then everything else is using Honda Sensing because we can't do what GM does.
Acura watch.
Acura watch. Yes. Very different. Yes.
And
is the
different.
MDX great to drive? Yes. How much room does it have? Not as much as other brands, and not. And then
there's
efficiency.
But then there's the asterisk.
Cheaper.
But then there's the asterisk there. I think MDX is fun to drive in a vacuum where a lot of the other competition doesn't exist.
Right.
And now, unfortunately, does. So Acura had this segment of the easy, practical 3-row thing that was moderately fun to drive, a lot cheaper than the European options. But the moment the European options started having bigger 3-row things, MDX sales have suffered. And this year, it looks like Volvo, with the combination of EX90 and XC90, actually outsold MDX in the US. Lexus TX blew it away. The moment TX came out, everybody ran for the hills and was like, oh, well, that's what we really wanted in the first place.
And everyone loves to drive their TX because it's so exciting to drive, right?
Mm-hmm. But that's part of my thought on Prelude. Prelude, I think, is a lovely thought. It makes sense in the Honda way of things. It's too expensive for what it is. I think it should have been either A, $10,000 less expensive and a higher volume product, or B, $10,000 more expensive, an Acura, and had more power. Like, it's stuck in this weird middle land where you're like, why would I not just get a Civic Hybrid or a Civic Si or something else? If that had been an Acura and they'd given it 50 more ponies, so there was a reason to get it over a Civic Hybrid, it would have made more sense.
That's the RS.
I think there's also the challenge of, with Acura, of just like, when they introduced the slogan as precision crafted performance, does anybody think of Acura as a performance brand except for its own marketing executives? Because I get
pro Jason.
Yes,
No, I'm just kidding, because he's
Tyson's
a good friend,
also great. But no, like, I think we all agree, like, an Integra is a very fun product to drive. But then you get in this weird thing where it's like, okay, I can either get the normal Integra, which is underpowered for its class, or I can get the the Integra Type S, which is just like not really a luxury product anymore. It's so focused on the performance, right? Yeah. And I love that car.
Still somehow isn't as much fun as an Audi.
I disagree with that entirely. I don't think Audi's made a fun to drive car in a long time. But I haven't driven
the RS3 is really fun.
Yeah, that's true. Although the one that we had for performance car the year at Road and Track was making crunchy diff noises within like one lap of our driving. No, I love the Civic Type R and the Integra Type S. I think they're awesome. For me, a guy who does not have $60,000 to throw at this car, and even if he did, I would be spending on an SUV because I do off-road and adventure stuff. But
then Honda shows their development budget hand because there's no automatic, and I love a manual. I've owned manuals.
Yes,
but that's not what sells.
Yeah, and I think what I was going to say is just the nuance of trying to explain to people that we are a performance brand. Like, the reason you buy Acura is for performance, except we're the slowest in every category, and we don't make any unique engines. We don't do anything that Honda doesn't. Like, precision crafted performance so long. I guess the MDX Type S has the turbo, which is like different.
Yes, that's finally different. Thank God. But also, hey, that is the engine that the Passport needs. So guys, can you stop being different for a moment and stick that puppy in the Passport?
Be more different, except don't be different. We need more of the same differentness, please.
Right, but both you need to do more things, and you can't afford to do them separate. Yeah, and just I think the Passport is the first time where they're catching on. They're like, oh, wait, what excites SUV buyers is different than what excites our sedan buyers. And I think that's a good trend line for them. But yeah, I mean, there's just a real challenge of like, what do these brands really mean? And I think Honda still has so much goodwill, and this is something that me and Alex were texting about that led to this of, there is some consumer surveys show that if you look at normal public opinion, and Alex pointed out this may not be car buying intended people, and maybe low information people, but a lot of people think that who makes the best EVs is Toyota and Honda. And why do they think that? Well, because those companies they've always led on fuel efficiency. They've always led on hybrids, even though, we can argue about whether or not, I think what Alex pointed out, what Travis pointed out, that Honda and Toyota are seen as the same has been really valuable to Honda of like reliability wise.
To be honest, a lot of people lump Nissan in there too because they're like, oh, they're Japanese,
right? And or Subaru, and but I think where was I going with this? I don't know. Basically, the point just being that there is such a large gap between these companies, and Honda not knowing how to position itself in this world where Toyota is so aggressive in the hybrid world, and then also not having, that both of these companies are seen as leaders in EVs, when that's objectively not true, right? I mean, no one that we talk to in this industry would believe that. Toyota at least has a few options. Honda has no leadership whatsoever. But I was telling Alex about this, where you can sustain that belief for a long time based on your reputation. But eventually, public opinion is not completely divorced from reality. It does catch up to you. And by the time it catches up to you, it's too late. By the time people no longer see you as a leader, when you come out next year with an interesting product, it's going to take them 3 years to realize that that's on the market. And so you have these buyers who have always purchased based on efficiency, who have always trusted you in that to be a tech leader. And they are so deep in their trust that they will ignore objective reality on the ground. That can't last forever. And Toyota has at least offered good enough options now in a couple segments where I don't think like the BZ Woodlands like software is as good as like a GM EV, but it's way lighter and more efficient, and that's more range on the same battery. So there's some real argument there. And by the time the next generation comes around, maybe it has one pedal driving and route planning, and we get there. But Honda, I mean, when you don't even have anything in the pipeline, you just eventually going to realize, like, consumers are going to catch on that, hey, if I want an electric car, don't go to Honda. They do hybrids. They do naturally aspirated V6s. And that's going to be a real problem in 2032 when you're not looking for a gas car, right? Like, you're going to have in your head that like, oh yeah, Honda's like kind of behind on this stuff. And it takes a while. It takes a really long time to build as good of a reputation as they have. And it doesn't take as long to lose it. And then it takes even longer to get it back. I mean, how many Cadillac redemption arcs did we need before we finally got one that seems to be sticking a little bit, right?
Yes. Well, that's Cadillac's one of those brands that's always in reinvention.
Yeah.
But I found the survey you're thinking of, the EV Intelligence survey. They surveyed 3,000 people, which is usually the minimum for an independently led survey. You can call up all sorts of survey companies, be like, I want to survey consumers, go find me weighted averages of ages and demographics and whatever. And 3,000 is the cheapest number typical survey set. So it's a relatively small survey. They weren't in market. These are just random consumers, which actually I think is valuable in one way, but also in a different way is not indicative of what consumers buying cars are doing, but is telling us what everybody around the kitchen table is talking about. Or when your uncle's like, I might need a new car, I don't know what EV to buy, and someone's like, buy a Honda EV, right? So useful in that sense, because these views are really head spinning. Toyota tops on there with 49% having a positive view of their EV brand, Honda at 44%. Then it's BMW, Audi, Porsche.
Holding strong for Honda.
So in order: Toyota, Honda, BMW, Audi, Porsche, Chevy, Cadillac, Ford, Nissan, Hyundai, Volvo, GMC, Volkswagen, Kia, Genesis, Rivian, Lucid, Cruise, Waymo, Zoox, and Tesla. By the way, you can't go buy a Cruise or a Waymo or a Zoox, so I have no idea why they're even on that list.
Tesla's not loving that situation at all.
Tesla was drawn down because even though their positivity score was about the same as Volvo, so people were as positive about their EVs as Volvo EVs, they have a 37% negative. Apparently that shifted dramatically because of Elon's politics. Not surprising.
Right. My headline for that story was consumers have no idea who makes good EVs. Was like the because I mean, seriously, it would be more accurate if you read the chart fully upside down, right? I mean, Hyundai and Kia and Tesla and Rivian and Lucid are near the bottom, and then the top two. I mean, BMW being three. I
That's
think of
okay.
the
I'm good
legacy,
with
yeah,
that.
like that's great. But yeah, it's like, well, why are BMW and Audi right behind Toyota and Honda? Because low information consumers are like, these guys make cutting edge
Mhm.
technology, right? And I do think you are right, Alex, in that there's a limitation of this being not in market consumers, because once you do research, some of these things are going to disappear.
Yeah.
But the herd wisdom, I see this every time I talk about. I remember this week where I had, back to back. I think it was an Ioniq 6 and then a BZ4X. This was 2 years ago or something. And I was talking to a group about, oh yeah, I was like, oh, what have you been driving recently? I said, oh, I had this Hyundai Ioniq 6 that was really cool, and just like eyes glazed over, didn't care. And then I was like, yeah, and then I had this Toyota EV, and they're like, ooh, how's that? Like the way people's hearts just open up, like Toyota, oh, my lovely sacred company that could do. I mean, the
This will be
brand
my
there.
salvation.
No, 100%. People think that they just can't do any wrong, and
Yeah.
I think Toyota recognizes the value of that and doesn't want to lose that.
I just love it. Similar because on the other side of that wall is a materials engineering company. So we get customers coming through for that side all the time. And because I do what I do, some of them will swing by my office and when they're car shopping and be like, so what about this? What about that? And the funniest thing I ever heard was a guy who had bought a Toyota Tundra. And he's like, what do you think of the Tundra? I bought one because I was looking for the most reliable truck in the segment. I've heard all these other ones have engine issues. And I was like, you're going to need a new engine, right?
Yeah, just a whole new one.
A whole
But
new.
isn't it great that you can drive yours for a while and then get a brand new engine? Like, isn't that cool and exciting? We
And
got a
that is
comment
the funny
this
part.
morning on a Kia Telluride video that said, I don't trust these Korean companies. And I was like, and that's fine, right? Have your thing. But that's a 30-year ago opinion, 20-year ago opinion. That's not going to help you today.
20 years ago. Yeah. But the funny part of that was he was like, he thought that the recall was a feature, not a bug. He's like, oh, but Toyota's doing something about it. And I'm like, so when Ford recalls an engine, are they doing something about it and that's a positive thing? Oh no, that was a bad design.
Yeah.
Like,
and this is where the being behind on technology is better thing has started to sink in. And I just think it's so interesting because, like, what are some of the things that we've talked about today? Alex, the 5 and 6 speed transmission problems. That's a pretty, I mean, if you're still having problems with 5 and 6 speeds, right? Like, that's archaic technology. What is the biggest engine recall news of the past year? 6.2 liter push rod activated V8s from GM, right? So many, obviously there is a cost of doing new things and you mess up more of new things, but there's this assumption that because we've been building it for a while, we can just keep building it and it'll all be perfect. But quality is a choice you make every day, and it's an institutional choice. And yes, some of that is Toyota takes a minute to study things and puts it through rigorous standards. But as it's proven, like, they took a long, long time going turbo in those cars, and they still absolutely blew it. And also the new Tundra, it wasn't just the turbochargers that had issues, right? It was also like literal chassis problems of just like water ingress or squeaks from the rear. And when you do a wholly new platform, you're going to have problems, even if that platform is not the cutting edge thing, because you did that last Tundra platform for 15 years. Like, you got pretty good at building that exact one. But by the time I was writing a review of the 2018 Tundra for CNBC, and I think it's the most negative response I've ever gotten, because I was like, yes, this is more reliable, but it's less safe, way less fuel efficient, less comfortable, louder. It's worse in every single metric except for maybe it'll be more reliable. But it's not like an F-150 is going to send you to the poorhouse keeping it on the road, right? Like, those are not unreliable products. And I think there is this, again, perfect being the enemy of good of like, yes, you do want to use things that are proven. And I am a big believer in reliability, but ultimately, like, you do need to continue innovating, because at some point, like, this was something I was talking to my dad about when he was looking at, like, he was considering getting a Toyota Land Cruiser instead of getting a BMW X5 because he was worried about the maintenance costs. And I was like, that's totally fair. except like when you factor in that you're going to get 14 miles per gallon instead of 22.
Yeah.
I mean, over time, like, what does that actually mean for your, like, it's the extra couple $100 on maintenance?
Mhm.
Like, there's this, especially on internet communities, this deification of reliability that I've definitely contributed to, because I really believe that it's still underrated by a lot of consumers. But on the flip side, like, it can't be the excuse for never doing anything new and never
Right.
getting better, right? Like, we
It
need
is-
to learn these things.
It is intriguing because when we looked into the actuarial costs, like Edmunds uses third-party insurance repair cost estimates for some of their total cost to own. And when you look into the actual ownership cost of a 4Runner versus a Grand Cherokee, you'll discover that they're actually not that far off. And the Grand Cherokee, because of the cash on the hood, the reality that you'll get 11% off MSRP, and how that affects the resale value calculation at the end, the actual out-of-pocket cost on a Grand Cherokee is generally speaking less than a comparable 4Runner because they're more efficient and they just started out less expensive. Sometimes
it's doubly true on the used market, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's why when people, like, I was talking about shopping for trucks, I was looking at Colorados and Rangers, and someone's like, why don't you get a Tacoma? I'm like, because I'd spend 10 grand more to get the same truck. And I know it will probably be more reliable, but I'm not spending 10 grand on maintenance on either of these platforms in the next 5-year horizon that I'm planning to use it. Like, and if it does break, it's like, well, the parts are cheaper too, and it's easier to work. So yeah, there is a limitation. I think cost of ownership is really important, but yeah, recognizing that all of these things, fuel economy and repair costs and parts costs, all these things factor in. And I think if you, and not only that, but considering reliability on a brand by brand basis is just, it's directional and it can provide you some value, but in general, every car, like, who makes a more reliable truck, Ford or Chevy? The answer is that changes almost every generation.
It depends on which one you get too.
Right.
Which engine did you get? What trim did you get? And there's so many different
And what's
options.
the most reliable Silverado engine right now? It's the 2.7
Probably the
turbo.
2.7 turbo.
Yeah, that's, I mean, from everything I've seen and from GM's internal metrics.
The one that everybody was afraid of.
Right. And it's just like, well, when they're afraid of it, maybe they put more effort into it. Whereas, the 6.2 that they've been making for 18 years is like, oh God, that one's been a nightmare. And so
let's, one unpopular thought before we continue on to our game, which will end the episode. And that is, part of me actually is okay with the cancellation of the Acura EV, because I think that Acura is in already such a weird spot with almost half of their sales volume being offline. I mean, the 15% practically of Acura was being built by General Motors. They killed off RDX, so 28% of their sales volume's gone. And their sales volume should be, as a result, in 2026, about the same as it was the first year they launched in America. So not ideal, right? And I think that honestly, the EV as it would have come would have been such an also ran that I think actually maybe it would have been worse for the reputation than anything, in the light of the Volvo EX60 getting 400 miles of range, the iX3 giving you 400 miles of range, both of them actually being priced a lot lower than I think everybody else had expected and charging really, really super duper fast. So how would an Acura that was significantly lower range and 25% less range and charged 50%, took 50% longer to charge, like that number doesn't help square the circle, especially given the elephant in the room, which is Tesla, and they're still going to be the bigger sales volume here. So was that the right way, or should they have just delayed it and maybe spent more money on it?
I mean, that's the catch-22 that they've backed themselves into, right? Where it's like, well, if the argument is this is the right decision because you couldn't have competed anyway, which is something, like I had someone from internal Honda, the department I never worked with before, reach out saying, yeah, I'm really sad this is dead. Also, it wasn't going to be competitive. This was 0 series overall. So I get it. I don't know how to feel. And then I had an Acura salesman from Canada reach out and be like, yeah, already we have a problem of people come in and there's not enough choices. And now there's going to be even fewer choices. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's not a good sign for the company that the choices are don't compete or get clobbered. But I do think there's a lot of loyalty and there's a lot of buyers that I think, like you said, it's not great for Honda and Acura that so much of their product strategy right now seems to be loss aversion of like, we don't want you to leave to buy a truck somewhere else. So Ridgeline exists. But I do think there's a real aspect of that, of like Travis pointed out earlier, ZDX lease returns are going to come in, and you want to be able to keep them somewhere in the family. And like, what are you going to do? Tell the guy to get an ADX? Like,
Yeah.
So I think, yes, I'm not going to cry over them canceling it, because I agree that I don't think this would have been super competitive. But also, I think we could admit that most of the Acura products of the last 10 years haven't been super competitive, and at least they're products and they exist, and you can learn from that. You can presumably make some money. The fact that they would have lost money on it, though, maybe it isn't that bad that it was canceled, but I do think just having any experience selling EVs at this point would have been valuable to the brand in terms of selling it, a product that you actually can take feedback from customers and incorporate it, rather than ZDX, where they could tell you, hey, we don't like this. And they say, well, that was a GM decision, so we can't do anything about it, right?
Yeah. So speaking of hard decisions, it's time to play our game, Would You Rather? I'll present Travis and Mac with 2 features, items, or other vehicle attributes, and you have to make a choice between them. They will be banished from existence forever. No take-backsies. So choose wisely here. And you have to be able to defend your choice as well. So we'll start with Travis. Which of these should be burned with fire? Manual transmissions or air conditioning?
Manual transmissions.
Oh, how sad. Mac,
know.
are you in agreement?
Manual transmissions, absolutely.
Next, we'll start with Mac. Forced induction, any kind of turbo superchargers, even e-superchargers, etc., or all electric vehicles, period.
Turbochargers, I mean.
Turbos, wow.
One is going to go away in 10 years, and one is
Okay.
going to keep growing.
I would have gone for the middle ground plug-in hybrid. 'Cause you still have
Oh,
that. What
if
about
that
you,
was-
Travis?
No, the answer is turbochargers.
What?
Because hybrid is the new turbo.
Oh, so sad. So sad. Alrighty. Traction control or 4-wheel drive / all-wheel drive?
Oh, 4-wheel
You
drive.
can't have both. So you'd have 4-wheel drive
Yeah.
with no traction control.
No, get rid of
For
4-wheel drive.
everything.
4-wheel drive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would get rid of 4-wheel drive as well.
Yeah.
So you'd you'd get rid of 4-wheel drive.
I'd have the right tires.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. Let's try to do the Rubicon Trail with traction control. I'm super curious.
Hey, whoever wants it, we'll do it. Like, give us a call.
4-wheel
Let's
drive
go.
with open diffs and no traction control is so little grip anyway. And like, for the average person, I'm just thinking in the snow, I would rather them have stability control than that the unknown confidence of stability control saving their ass, rather than the known confidence of 4-wheel drive making me think. A 4-wheel drive vehicle without stability control is all of the confidence of a crazy Subaru owner with none of the security of it.
I will say, actually, 4-wheel drive with open diffs and no traction control is not that bad, because that's currently what my Grand Cherokee is. All of its Verilocks are done. Well, actually, that's not true, because the center's locked. But the front and rear Verilocks are totally toast, so there's nothing there. And a mouse chewed one of the wheel speed sensors, so the traction control is donezo. So it doesn't do anything at all.
It's one of those things that the traction control does so much that people aren't aware of, that the roll-on effect would be honestly unfathomable, right? It's that one little incident where we go, ooh, traction control saved me. And then you go on with your day, but that save you literally could have been saved you, right? And if you know you don't have 4-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, you are going to drive to accommodate that, whereas traction control is there when you have already not accommodated for that. Yeah. And we saw what happened when someone's traction control completely did not save them a couple weeks ago, Alex, right? Yes. You would have so much more of that.
Also, notably in the EV world, like that, no traction control would mean that we could never make an EV with more than like 250 horsepower, because you would just kill everyone. And like, yeah, that was part of the defense of the manual and the turbocharger thing. Is like, well, in an ideal world, 20 years from now, we won't have either of those things. And I know people are sad about the manual thing. I get it. I got a Miata to test recently because that's the one gas car I miss, and I love a manual. But also, us car guys got to recommend, or car guys and gals got to understand, we lost. It's less than 1% of the market. It's for Porsche owners.
Not even just here, globally, it's going.
So our next hard choice here will apply to EVs as well. Sunroofs of any description, safari windows, pana roofs, moon roofs, whatever you want to call it, any hole in the ceiling that opens or does not open.
Including all glass.
All glass. Anything up there that is see-through or opens, anything up there in the heavens, right? Any of
Convertibles
that,
also.
or leather, pleather, naugahyde, etc. Any kind of non-fabric seating service.
Does the first one include convertibles?
No, we'll let you have your convertibles. Nobody buys them, but we'll let you have them.
One. I guess, not trying to get too into it. Do seat covers still exist?
No, burn forever. Yeah, yep. No take backs. It's just classic velour. You could have your fancy velour again.
I'm banning leather. I don't care. I love an open top. I love I love convertibles, but I know no one buys them. But my EV panoramic roof is. I live in San Diego, so I'm all for windows down and sunroof open a lot of the time. Every time I have a car,
I'm in Seattle, and it's either dark gray or light gray, and either way, it's less gray with an all glass roof. So yeah, I think I'm getting rid of the leather.
Yeah, okay.
Wow,
next up, deep dive here. Are you sending Mercedes or BMW into the fire?
Mercedes.
Ooh, why?
Yeah.
Mercedes.
Defend your choice.
And this is nothing against Mercedes, but if I get a choice, I would rather have BMW in the market. I have never, ever, ever shopped for any version of a Mercedes vehicle. It's never fallen into my realm of interesting. What they do very well is of very little interest to me. So that's what it comes down to. I guess the larger knock-on effect is
no Sprinter vans and no commercial trucks.
Right.
They'd all be gone.
Right.
It's sad.
That's what I'm thinking is, are we going to lose a big chunk there? But it's not like that couldn't be picked up by somebody else. So yeah, but that's actually the biggest fault is like Sprinter vans for me. And nothing against Mercedes.
I agree with something against Mercedes, which is I grew up more of a Mercedes fan. I actually I'm still considering just getting a W211 E-Class, the early 2000s one, because to me that's like ultimate simple luxury. But the reason I loved Mercedes growing up is the focus on just really nice experience and the reputation for reliability. And I feel like in the last 10 years, I think their interiors have gone so big into the Vegas nightclub sort of vibe. I find like a BMW 5 Series is maybe not as good of a BMW as BMW fans would want, but like the G Series 5 Series, I think is the best Mercedes E-Class ever built. Like I just think all the controls are really nice. I think BMW does better software. I think they do better engines. I think the B58 and B48 are incredible. And then I think their EVs are better and more compelling. And so to me, it's an easy choice, even though I do love like an old Benz, like the big luxury plush chair. I love a Mercedes seat so much.
See, we agree on that one, and I don't even like an old big Benz.
Yeah.
So frunk or spare tire?
Spare tire.
Wow, you'd rather have a frunk. Wow. Says the man who doesn't have a frunk.
Correct.
So
I don't have a frunk or a spare tire, so I've already given them both. But.
Travis has a frunk. What are you giving up?
I'm giving a spare tire.
Giving up the spare tire? Okay. Wow.
And here's the thing. I don't think nobody needs a spare tire. I just think we're at the point where.
But remember, this would be banished from existence. Nothing would have a spare tire. The pickup truck, spare free.
No, it would not have a spare tire slot, but it doesn't mean somebody couldn't put an extra tire.
No spare would be the absolutes here.
You're talking about a spare tire as applied by the manufacturer. There's nothing that stops someone from putting an extra tire.
This edict would instantly evaporate once
you're going against the spirit of the game, Travis.
Once there was any extra tire inserted in any manner onto or into the vehicle, it would just poof disappear.
I think
okay. Moving along on the tire front, summer tires or winter tires?
Summer tires, because I already got rid of four-wheel drive.
Okay, convertibles or pickup trucks?
Mac?
Oh, I really like convertibles and pickup trucks, and especially the one at the corner of my street that's a Dodge Dakota pickup truck. Super rare, but I would get rid of convertibles. Unfortunately, trucks do need to exist.
Wow. Tough choices here.
I think I get rid of trucks.
Wow. Okay. So you do all the truck things in your convertible.
I'm holding on to the whimsy. I mean, it was 2 weeks ago, I saw a man bringing home a 55 or 65-inch television in his Mercedes convertible. Don't tell me it can't happen.
Would you ditch power seats or hatchbacks?
Power seats.
Hatchbacks. They don't exist in our market anyway in any meaningful capacity.
Nothing with a hatch.
Oh, nothing with a hatch, so no SUVs. Oh, power seats.
They could have powered. They could have barn doors.
Oh,
I think they all should have barn doors.
yeah. Actually, okay. I'm back to ditching the hatchbacks. I want that.
DC charging or AC charging?
DC.
DC. Yeah.
So no road tripping your EV then.
I mean, they're not going to install a DC charger at my house, so. I mean,
Okay.
unless you.
I
could
think
do
practically
DC
speaking, it comes down to the larger roll-on effect, and that becomes EV adoption disappears if there's no AC charging, and DC charging cannot be, it will not be brought home in any affordable capacity. So I guess, yeah, I'm going DC.
Mm-mm. And then we'll end our episode with the eternal battle: Wrangler or Bronco?
I would banish Wrangler because to me, I think the Wrangler's a better off-roader, and if I was more hardcore, absolutely. But the thing to me is, like, I can deal with uncomfortable ride and the bad, like, the packaging compromises of either of those. The one thing that really exhausts me in a Wrangler is that I can't drive it for a couple hours on the highway because I'm just this the whole time. And just having a normal steering system that tracks straight is so valuable to me.
Yeah, you think that's bad? Try a Grenadier.
Track straight.
Which are you burning, Travis?
I think I'm getting rid of the Bronco, and it's because, you know, as fun killing and fuddy duddy as I can be, the Wrangler world just is such a part of Americana car culture, and I don't think I'd ever own a Wrangler, but I think that one's got to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
And if we followed your edict, then OJ wouldn't have gotten away.
Oh,
wait, no, he didn't get away. Whatever.
Now, part of me is sad that they didn't call it a Bronco 3. Maybe Bronco 2 was so bad that they just couldn't do it. But part of me was like, just lean into that one. Try it again. Mm-hmm. At any rate, with that, it is time for us to end the episode. Where can everybody find you, Mac?
You can find me at InsideEVs.com. Deputy editor there, so read and edit most of the stuff on there, or interim editor-in-chief, I should say. We also have our own podcast, the InsideEVs Plugged In podcast. Highly recommend checking that out. If you were willing to listen to an hour and a half of this, you're willing to probably listen to an hour and a half or an hour of that.
All right, everybody. Catch everybody later. Don't forget those reviews.